podcast. I am your host, Khaled Abdallah, and I'm joined today by a special guest, Dr. Daniel Labby. How's everything going today, Doctor?
Good, Khaled. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for jumping on. So, just to give you guys a quick intro, Dr. Labby is a board certified ophthalmologist who has served as a staff ophthalmologist for several professional sports teams, including MLB, NHL, and NBA, as well as working with medal winning teams at the Beijing and Tokyo Olympic Games. With over 30 years of experience in sports and performance vision, he has been featured on the NBC Today Show, Fox News, CBS News, the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, and Sports Illustrated. Dr. Laby has also been part of 8 MLB World Series championships, as well as several league championships. So that's quite a resume. I was very happy that you agreed to jump on the podcast. So we'll start at the beginning. How did you go from, standard optometry into sports vision?
It's a great question. And the answer is totally by accident. I had no intention of that. Growing up, I played Little League. I played, wasn't very good. I was on the golf team, the varsity golf team, but only because they were short one person and needed somebody to fill in the last spot. So that was me. So I'm not very athletic, and I really didn't think about sports or athletics very much until I got to my fellowship at UCLA 31 years ago or so. And we had the group had done work with the Dodgers the previous spring, only a few months before. They needed somebody to kind of finish up that project and write a report, write a paper, a scientific paper. And the fellowship director basically told me that he wanted me to take over that project. I wanted to do my own projects, design my own project, the whole thing, and something that had to do with the science, with the ophthalmology that I was training for. But he kind of insisted, and you can't really say no to the chief. And so I ended up taking on that project, and actually ended up being most of what I've done for the last 30 plus years is the sports vision. So it's actually totally by accident, but I'm very happy that accident happened.
Yeah, absolutely. So, aside from the obvious, and, of course, athletes need to see for the most part to do their jobs. Specifically, why is working with an ophthalmologist and improving, the vision and all that, why is that so important for performance and especially high performing athletes?
Well, the easy answer is I tried to think of a sport that's played with the eyes closed, and I couldn't come up with one. And so that's the easy answer, that you need your eyes to play sports, and certainly to play successfully, you need your eyes. And that's really what's driven the last 30 years of my work, is trying to understand what it is in the vision, what the eyes see, but also what the brain does with the visual information that's critical to performance. And we've seen over the 30 years of skyrocketing and mushrooming of companies that are involved in the cognitive sports space, different companies simulating plays, different companies testing things, predicting what players are going to perform well. It really all comes down to what they're doing with their vision in terms of processing and making motor action. And I think the difference I bring is kind of, number one, I'm not a company. I'm a doctor coming and try to help people perform at their best. And I think that's a very big differentiator. And so I use lots of tools. I use lots of apps, lots of different devices to try to maximize performance, but I do that based on science, based on what the research shows. And we try to, same thing if you go to the doctor. If you go to the doctor and they want someone to evaluate you, take an x-ray, do a throat culture, diagnose what's wrong, give you a treatment and fix it, right? And so we're doing the same thing with the athletes.
So I'm curious about the tools and the techniques and I guess trainings. I think you use that word. So what sort of techniques can besides perhaps a surgical technique, and we'll definitely talk about LASIK and that sort of thing. What other techniques and things can an athlete do to improve their performance?
Well, the sexy thing is to do something. Everybody wants to do something, to train, to take some technology, some new piece of equipment and use it to get better. Well, that's not bad, but it's not the greatest approach. We developed something called the sports vision pyramid. So if you think about a pyramid, that's a pretty good pyramid.
Yep.
What's in Egypt and South America, all over the world, these pyramids have stood for thousands of years because a pyramid is a very stable structure. And so we want the visual system and how the brain uses vision to be a similar stable structure. And so if we think about that, we have the bottom of the pyramid, which is what actually the eye sees. That's the 20/20, 20/40, 20/10 number, and that's what's going to be corrected mostly with glasses or contact lenses. And it doesn't make sense to train somebody, for example, to swing faster at a fastball if they can't see the fastball. The first thing you want to do is make sure they can see it, and then train them to react to it properly and so forth. And so using devices higher up on the pyramid to train decision making or to train hand-eye coordination or eye-foot coordination, whatever the sport is, doesn't make sense unless your base as a pyramid is optimized as well. So we start from the bottom and
Hmm.
we work upwards, and we check vision, and we can talk later about how we check vision different than the usual eye chart. And then we move on to other things, how the eyes work together, how the brain makes a decision, how it's biased by information, and how it coordinates perfectly timed, perfectly placed motor action to succeed in the sport.
Got it. Got it. And as far as a surgical intervention, things like LASIK, I know the LASIK technology has improved considerably over the last, I don't know, 10, 20 years, whatever it may be. Um, is that a common thing that athletes do these days? Is it, even if they have pretty good vision, are they like, especially, I would think maybe baseball players more than most because they want to track the flight of the ball and the spinning of the thread on the baseball, that sort of thing. So are they opting for that, a lot more than perhaps they used to?
Well, I'm just back from spring training where we took care of hundreds of players, and that's certainly a topic that came up on several occasions. Um, and it's a little bit of a slippery slope, and it does depend on what sport you play. There are certain sports where what I'm going to say now doesn't really apply, but other sports, and I call them small target, fast moving sports: hockey, baseball, tennis, anything that has
Yeah, makes
a
sense.
small target that's moving quickly, where your identification of the spin of the target, as you alluded to with the seams, becomes critical to your success. The problem is that well, I'll ask you a question. We'll turn the table around here. I'll
Yeah,
interview you.
please.
What do you think the average vision of a professional baseball player is?
Average vision is in like 2020, that sort of thing, or
Yep.
I don't know, 2020,
So
2010, I don't
2020
know.
is normal vision, right?
Okay.
That's what all of us would expect it to see normally. If we had something like 2040 vision, that's worse
Hmm.
than normal. That means that we see from 20 feet what the normal person can see from 40 feet. In other words, we have to be 20 feet closer to see the same thing. That's
Got it.
not ideal.
Okay.
The limit of human vision, the best vision that is possible, is 20/8, which means the person who has that vision can see from 20 feet what the normal person sees from 8 feet. So they can the
Wow.
baseball player, for example, would be 12 feet further away to still see it. That's sort of the limit of as good as you can get. You can't get 20/2 or 20/5. 20/8 is usually considered pretty much the limit. So 2020 being the kind of one goalpost of what's normal, 20/8 being like the best you can do. The ball players are 20/12. That's the average for Major League
Wow.
Baseball. So that's important to keep in mind. And that's the average. So if you're 2015 or better, we're pretty happy that you're going to be able to pick up the spin properly and do it quickly. And we can, let's say, get into that later. But it's not just a matter of seeing it; you have to see it quickly, because the baseball takes less than half a second to get to home plate, and if you don't see it quickly, it's going to be too late to swing. And so that 20/12 number becomes important, or 2015 becomes important, because that's when we have a player who's 20/20. Regular doctor who doesn't know about sports vision may say, "You're fine, you're normal, no problem, you don't need glasses." We'll say we have work to do. We'll say that we have to try to come up with a prescription to get you to 2015 if possible, maybe even better to 2012. And that's where the LASIK problem comes in, because LASIK is really good at getting you to 2020. But if you look at studies that have been published of hundreds, thousands of people, the number that get to 20/12 after having LASIK is not very many. In fact, 2015 would be really nice. The average is about 2017 to 2019. And so if I have someone in contacts that's 2012 and they do LASIK and they're 2017 or 2019 or 2020, they've lost vision, right? They used to be better with the
Wow.
contacts. Now they're
Hmm.
worse. And the 2020 numbers, as we said, isn't good enough to see the spin. So now we have a problem. And that's not to mention the small likelihood of, or small chance of having complications, of having dry eye, of having glare at night, things of that nature that can really mess up, your performance. And we published a paper, and it's a while back now, probably 10 years ago, looking at players who said that the contacts were bothering them, and that because of that they weren't hitting well, and all the different excuses people made to not wear contacts, to have laser. And they had the refractive surgery. And we looked at their performance before and after, because if the contact lens were preventing them from performing as they should, you'd expect after the laser their performance would be better, because we took away the reason that they were bad. Well, we found no statistical difference when we looked at the players who had performance before and after. In other words, it didn't
Wow.
make a difference in how they played. So that's not a reason to do it either. And so here we have a, a a possible chance that you'll see what you need to see, but a more likely chance that you won't. You'll have some complications, and it won't make you play better. And so, what we tell the baseball players is great procedure, wonderful procedure the day you retire, but not to do it during your performance in the game.
Okay. Yeah, I never would have guessed that. I mean, as a LASIK patient myself, I mean, I had astigmatism, I had awful vision, I wore contacts from high school all the way through maybe my mid 20s. Played high school sports, and I did fine with the contacts. I didn't play baseball or anything, but I think it was more than anything, it's the convenience, and I think I can relate to them with the convenience of LASIK versus contacts, especially if you're out on the dirt, you're out in the sun, things get in there, your contacts fall out. Maybe you're sliding into home plate and you get whacked in the head and your contact falls out. I'm sure they have backups, but I can understand the need for convenience in that situation. But I had no idea that it was actually a potential, detraction from their performance and their vision. I always assumed, it's always going to be better uh,
Right.
with LASIK versus contacts. So, but is that pretty common where you're just having to dissuade guys from doing it? And on the other side, are there people where you've had to convince to do it because it would actually help them?
Yeah, yeah. The answer is yes to both. On the side about dissuading, that's pretty much the norm. What I try to do is find a contact lens that's comfortable for them, one that works well. And you're right, the convenience factor is not going to be there when you have a contact lens. You have one other thing you have to worry about every day, no doubt. But at the elite level, and this is important, if we're playing little league, well, I'm not sure any little leaguers should really have refractive surgery. They're too young for that. But if we're playing just weekend for fun, it's probably fine. But when you get to the elite level where the ball is moving at Roethlisberger Chapman speeds 103 miles an hour, you need to have really good vision, and you can't have any dry surface or anything bothering you about glare because you have playing the night game or having less than ideal vision if you're going to have hope to hit his balls.
Mm-hmm.
And so the discussion is a little bit different if we're talking to an elite professional athlete or if we're talking to someone who just wants to have fun and be convenient and so forth. So that's one point. Um, the other point is there are occasionally folks that we can't get good corrections with the contact lenses, and either they have a problem that the lens isn't fitting well, or it's not in the right position, or whatever the reason is. And I've sent several people to some specialists I know across the country that do a lot of this kind of work, that are at the cutting edge of refractive surgery. And I had, I'll tell you, I had one guy that I sent there that actually ended up better than I could get him the contacts. So he actually
Wow.
had better vision. So that was a great bonus, and he didn't have any of the side effects. So for him, it worked out wonderfully. Um, the problem is when we look at in medicine, we talk about populations, not just one person. If one person is successful, that doesn't mean anyone else is going to be successful. If
Mm-hmm.
everybody in a group of 1,000 people is successful, there's a good chance that you'll be successful as well. And so it's really case by case, trying to maximize performance, minimize risk, so that the player can perform at their best, as opposed to be hampered by dryness, that to put drops in their eyes all the time, or can't play at night because there's too much like glare in their eyes. You can look at Brian McCann, for example. He used to be a catcher for the Braves,
Yeah.
ended up
Yeah.
with the Yankees. Um, if you look on him online, you'll see how many times he needed to have refractive surgery done, a couple times, and what ended up time on the DL list, and it had an impact on his career. Even Tiger
Wow.
Woods, who's a big proponent, advertising proponent of refractive surgery, has had several procedures done, not just one and done, several. And so you need to really dig in deeply. It's a surgical procedure. Surgical procedures mean there's risks and benefits, and you need to think about the alternatives as well to make sure that you're making the best decision possible.
Yeah, I think the general lean for most folks is surgical intervention. Is just it seems easier, it seems more straightforward, versus some of the other maybe more tedious or less convenient interventions that take a little bit longer. So I saw recently there was an article about Steph Curry where he talked about a condition that he suffers from. I believe it's pronounced keratoconus. I think
Keratoconus,
Casey
that's right. Yep.
keratoconus. Okay, I got that right the first time. Um, so that basically led me down a little bit of a rabbit hole of asking, how is someone that is the greatest shooter of all time in NBA history, who with a job that requires a lot of accuracy and I assume great vision, how does a condition like that affect his play? And have you had anyone else, over the years that have had other eye conditions that you've had to treat? I mean, obviously you can't name names, but just other folks that you've had to work with that have had, issues like this.
Absolutely, couple of keratoconus, professional ball players. If you search online, um, I can do a quick search. I don't want to give you his name until you search, but if you search online keratoconus MLB, you'll find the one I'm thinking about.
Sure.
He was playing last season. I'm not sure where he is this season, but he was definitely playing last season. A well-known, very successful player, but worked really hard on treating the keratoconus lots of different ways. Um, think again about the different sport, right? Basketball versus the small target, fast-moving sports is going to be a little different in terms of vision. In basketball, the ball's not moving quickly; it's a fairly large target, and the goal, if you will, is stationary, right? Baseball, what
Makes
you're
sense.
trying
Yeah.
to hit is moving. That's a different visual skill set. Um, there's something in basketball critical called the quiet eye, and I'm going to guess if I were to measure the quiet eye of Steph Curry, which I never have, it would be off the charts, is my guess.
Hmm.
We did publish a paper on the quiet eye with another NBA team looking at guys who had 16 out of 16 free throws compared to like 10 or 12 out of 16, or no, sorry, 15 or 16 out of 30 free throw success versus 30 out of 30 free throw success. And the guys who had the 30 out of 30 were really fixed on the front of the rim the entire time they were making their shot, as opposed to the guys who were worse, looking all over the backboard, all over the rim as they made their shot.
Okay.
And so my guess is Steph Curry's vision was good enough to identify that and keep his eye steady. But keratoconus can be a significant hampering effect. There's a range. Not everyone with it has the same effect on vision. There's definitely a range of effect, and there's several different treatments for it. And as long as it's treated, you're back to normal.
So you mentioned the quiet eye. I definitely want to hear a lot more about that. But before we do, so can you tell us, like, what is keratoconus and what does it do? What's the
Yeah.
impact of that?
Yeah. So think about the first thing is to understand what astigmatism is. Versus being nearsighted or farsighted. So if you have astigmatism, it means that the front surface of your eye is curved like an NFL football as opposed to an NBA basketball. If you think about an NBA basketball, it's a sphere, so no matter which way you go around the outside of the basketball, you have the same curvature. Look at an NFL football, one curve is different than the other curve, 90 degrees apart. That's extreme astigmatism. But we call that regular astigmatism, meaning that it's very regular in the curves. One is one way, one's the other way, and that's it. Now, keratoconus is abnormal curvature of the front of the eye, but it's not regular. We call it irregular. And keratoconus, if you think about kerato means cornea, and conus is like a cone. So if you
Hmm.
think about the front of the eye being like an ice cream cone, where the eyeball is the ice cream and the cornea is sticking out like the cone part, that's keratoconus. So instead of being kind of regular like the football shape, not the same in all directions, you have this cone which is different in almost every direction you go because it's sticking out like a cone, like an ice cream cone. And that leads to very distorted vision. So it's sort of astigmatism plus. It's a
Wow.
hyperastigmatism. It will make your vision blurry and it'll be hard to correct because we don't have any glasses that can correct the cone shaped surface of the eye.
Hmm. And contacts wouldn't fix that either.
A soft contact won't because the soft contact would just kind of drape over the ice cream cone.
Got it.
But
Okay.
a gas permeable or a hard contact lens, which is stiffer than the cornea, would squish that cone into the shape of the back of the contact lens, which is now a perfect sphere, which means it's corrected.
Okay. That sounds incredibly uncomfortable, if I have to be
It
honest.
sounds worse than it is. You don't
Okay.
feel any of that. Once you get used to the hard contact lens, you see fine, you feel fine, and I think that's what Steph is using, and that's what the other player I mentioned earlier is using as well.
Got it. Got it. Okay. So let's get to the quiet eye. So you mentioned that you said you have a study and there's scores on the quiet eye. What is the quiet eye and how does that quiet eye score, help an athlete's performance?
Yeah, the quiet eye is a pretty cool finding that was noted first by Professor Joan Vickers in Calgary, Canada, several years ago. And it's been shown not only in baseball, we showed it in NBA basketball, in NHL hockey, certainly in in golf. Golf Digest had a whole front page about the quiet eye several years ago. Um, it's really something that's important in all sports. In fact, it's important even in normal everyday life. And I'll give you the example in that regard. If you have a cucumber, for example, or a fruit or something that you're cutting very thin, and you're really concentrated, cut, 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 you're holding it and you're moving your finger back and you're cut, cut, cut. You can do that for a while and get really nice slices and not slice your finger. But if you're doing that and the doorbell rings or someone walks in the room and calls your name or says something, what you'll find pretty much always is that you're going to cut your finger, because the concentration of cutting precisely was broken when you were distracted. And that's a problem. So anything that distracts you from maintaining your full cognitive, motor, visual effort on the task will interfere with the task. And so the quiet eye measures how much your eye moves before, during, and just after the critical moment in the sport. So I'll give you another example in golf, for
Yeah,
example.
please.
If you're putting and you have the golf ball and you need the hole is, other side on the left or something, and you have the club and the club is going to have backswing and it's going to come forward and hit the ball. The ideal is to keep your eye on that point of contact as you make your backswing, as the club comes forward, as it makes contact, keeping your eye on that point of contact as the ball zips away towards the hole for a short time. You don't need to go look immediately where the ball is going the moment you hit it. That the ball is going to go the same
Hmm.
place, whether you look at it or not. And so the problem is that in order to move your eye to watch the ball go, it takes several hundred milliseconds for your brain to process that thought, to send to organize what's going to happen, to send the right impulses to the muscles of the eye, and to start that movement. That's something that's not instantaneous. It takes a very short time, but a critical time. And that means that just before the ball strikes the putter strikes the ball, you're not 100% thinking anymore about the shot. Some portion of what's going on here is thinking about moving your eyes to watch the ball, and that's kind of like taking your eye off the ball, if you will.
Yeah, I was gonna say
And
that's probably where that comes from.
you're not gonna get it. And so you want to, several studies have shown that if you have a good quiet eye in golf, you'll cut your strokes down, your handicap, you'll perform like a professional as opposed to an amateur, and so forth and so on. And the same thing, as I mentioned, in basketball is true. In baseball, if you're not looking at the right thing at the right point when the ball is going to be released in advance, you're not going to pick up the information you need visually either.
Hmm.
And so in all these sports, in hockey, goalies, what they're looking at has been looked at, measured when someone's coming towards them with the puck. What are they looking at in terms of, or when are they looking at the puck, and what are they looking at, where on the puck, where on the stick? That makes a big difference.
So there's the role of like external stimuli in taking, literally and maybe metaphorically taking your eye off the ball. Is that right?
Yeah, it's distraction, right? If you think about these guys, the first guy that comes to mind is Big Papi, the Red Sox several years ago before he
Hmm.
retired. He would
Yeah.
be wonderful in the bottom of the ninth inning, in the last season of the game or in the last season of the World Series. He wasn't flustered at all. He batted at that moment exactly the same way he batted in the first game of the season. And that's because he wasn't distracted. He didn't care what game it was. He didn't care what the noise was in the stadium, how many people in the stadium, what the score was, whether if he succeeded, they would win. If he failed, they would lose. None of that made a difference. He just did the same thing, no distraction at all. And it was fairly successful for him.
So that's like the clutch gene. So maybe that clutch gene that people talk about in athletes is, I mean, I know it's a mental thing, but maybe it's also a physical, a vision thing, because you're literally keeping your eye on the ball. You're doing, like you said, the same thing in the bottom of the ninth in Game 7 of the World Series as you would, in spring training. Uh, so this brings up kind of a question out of left field, I guess. But during the NBA bubble, there was a lot of talk about guys shooting percentages going up, scoring going up. And I think the easy explanation was, well, there's no distractions. They're living in Orlando at on the campus. And then, but I thought also, there's no fans, there's no cheerleaders, there's no scoreboard, there's none of that. So have you thought about that impacting the quiet eye of these players, and maybe that's a possible explanation for that increase in performance?
Yeah, I think for sure. People talk all this cognitive stuff is great, but it doesn't cause performance. What causes performance is your eyes telling your hands where to go. Now, the cognitive part is the connection there, but that's critical. And but if that connection isn't perfect, as fans, scene of the game, the point of the game, and so forth, that's going to make a difference. Even things like sleep, sleep when you go coast to coast and you travel and you're playing games at night, the sleep pattern is not ideal. But if you're all in the same complex, staying in the same place, no travel, sleeping the same in your own in a bed that becomes your own because it's a period of time, it's not a hotel bed. Your cognitive processing is going to be optimal, and that's going to lead to the best use of your vision and the best use of your vision to direct the motor action.
Yeah, I know NBA teams and, well, pro teams in general have spent tons of money on studying the impact of sleep and fatigue on performance. And that's why, NBA teams would rather, I think if they have a back to back, they'd rather leave early to get the decent sleep in, and they invested in better travel and things like that. So I guess it's all connected, and it all happens in the brain. So the question is, how does the brain help with the quiet eye and the vision? And I know it's all connected, but where does that connection happen, and how does that happen?
Well, remember the brain, the eyes are a camera. Simply a camera. There's nothing that the eyeballs do that do anything, almost anything. There's a couple exceptions we can get to that, but almost anything that besides just giving an image to the brain. What the brain does with that image through, most of the brain is related to vision one way or another. And so vision is really the main purpose of the brain, if you want to exaggerate a little bit. But it takes that visual information and it uses it to do everything that we do in life. And so vision is really critical in understanding how the brain uses vision. And there are parts of the brain that do different things for vision in terms of understanding a target, understanding what you're looking at, making motor action, all these different pieces. But they're all critical, they're all connected by vision. And even the motor action connected to vision. And so you really to think about, just someone's like reaction time without understanding the whole universe of vision doesn't make a lot of sense. So I think if people are gonna talk about cognitive performance and how we can train the brain to play better, really need to think about how we can maximize our visual system, which includes the brain, to work more efficiently and more optimally. And there's lots of entry points into that universe that you can exploit, train, if you will, to
Mm-hmm.
get better performance. Unfortunately, people think a lot about the brain without understanding that the brain might be the smaller part of the whole visual system that leads to the motor actions and to decisions and so forth.
Two follow-up questions to that. The first is, how do you measure that quiet eye? How do you give someone a quiet eye score?
Yeah.
And the other question is, what other tools or technology can be used to help someone improve that quiet eye score?
Yeah. So quiet eye is evaluated a couple different ways. The most graphical, easiest to understand, and I think most beneficial way when you're working with an athlete is to allow them to see what they did. And so we have a special pair of glasses that has a camera that goes forward and has cameras that are going backwards. So the cameras backwards are looking at the eyeballs. The cameras forward are looking at the scene, and we calibrate in advance to make sure what the person is looking at, we know where it is on the scene, and we record that. So we end up having actual in play, on field metric video, if you will, of what someone looked at when they tried to hit a baseball, for example. And we can then play that back and show them you're looking here, but you should have gone over there earlier. You're looking at his belt, which was nice in the beginning, but after that, you should have been out at the release point that you were anticipating when the ball went behind the back, so that you were quiet, not moving as the ball came through that point. You went there too late, for example, and here's a video to show that. And so that's how you can train it. So it's not a number you score; it's more of a interactive educational process where you can show somebody shooting a basket. Well, here's where you looked, but see all these places you were looking around the backboard. The better people pick a spot. So next time we do this, let's try to keep our eye on a certain spot, and we can even have a verbal mantra that they say to kind of reminding them of that. And we'll record it again, and let's see how you do. And lo and behold, the ball goes through the hoop,
Mm-hmm.
and we show them the video, and they see the difference. And that's a great educational process to help somebody gain a more quiet eye or a
So
proper
it's
quiet
like, yeah, it's like muscle memory, but for the muscles in the eyes, and
in the
controlling
brain, right?
and the brain. Yeah, yeah, and reinforcing that connection. And kind of making it I think just like a golf swing, right? Or a shooting motion or a throwing motion. It's just making it repeatable, efficient, focused, and just strengthening that connection. So when fatigue comes in, when there's the external stimuli, you're still able to, again, to use your big poppy example, swing in the World Series like you would in spring training. Um, how do you feel, or are you aware of any training using virtual reality and these headsets and things? I've seen boxing training things advertised, or even like baseball and softball training advertised with a bat that you attach to your headset and all that stuff. How do you feel about that? And do you think that has any positive impact on the quiet eye?
Yeah, not so much quiet eye, more. Well, there is some headsets that actually can create quiet eye because they have cameras looking at the eye tracking type thing. Think about the new Apple headset, for example. It has eye tracking, and you just move your eye around the screen and move your hand like this to choose things. Um, so potentially that might be something. But I've been in virtual reality for a long time. I started before medical school in computer science. I was a computer science major in college.
Okay. Oh,
And so I actually created the first surgical simulator in ophthalmology,
wow,
back
it's
with
incredible.
some colleagues in George Washington University in I'm going to say it was probably 1991, 1990, somewhere in that regard. So that was a while back if you think about
Hmm.
it. So I've been curious how to implement VR into the sports work I do for quite a while. And I think there's two different things to think about. Number one is working through the VR space on skills that are required to perform, and the other is trying to simulate the actual on-field experience in the VR space. And those are probably two very distinct approaches. People who have tried to simulate the experience in the VR space have run into problems. For example, maybe the Apple headset, but besides that, there isn't any headset that will give you the same resolution to see the spin of the ball
Hmm.
as it's released by the pitcher's hand in the real time that happens in real life. And so to try
Yeah.
to recreate batting when you just have a ball coming towards you without the process of assessment of what pitch is going to be, the prediction of where the ball is going to cross the plate, and your swing at the speeds we're talking about at the elite level, there is no system that can do that today. And companies that have tried have kind of moved off of that because it hasn't worked. So that's that approach. Now again, the new Apple headset is 4K on each monitor, and that might be sufficient to do that sort of thing, but that's to be seen. It's too new. The other aspect is using systems to train the skills needed, and there's several systems that do that. One, for example, is called Reflection Go, that has a headset, and for example, it can evaluate and train your hand-eye coordination. So you basically almost boxing hitting targets that
Hmm.
show up really fast, and it can measure that, and it can train you to do faster. And we've shown in papers that we've published that if you do that well, you're more likely to be successful batting than if you don't do that well. And so that's
Okay.
training a skill that's needed to bat, but not actually training it in a batting situation. For
Okay.
that, there are several VR platforms that have different things that are very good. And don't forget AR, augmented reality. Uh,
Yes. Yes.
there's another company called Home Court that has an augmented reality app for soccer and for basketball, where you have an iPad facing you and you actually see yourself, and the computer watches the ball, and based on how you react to what the computer is doing, can assess you as well. So not just VR, but AR has a role as well.
Yeah, I've seen. I haven't seen that specifically, but I have seen with the higher end Meta Quest. It is has does have a transparent glass in the front, so uh, I've seen like fitness apps kind of do that, where they're examining your. They put like a skeleton on your body, and they can correct your form when you're doing certain things and your mechanics. So it sounds like that's maybe the future for the other stuff, but not quite on the vision side of things. Maybe it's just quieting the noise around everything else so you can focus. So what do you think is next? What's on the cutting edge in the world of sports vision?
Well, there's quite a few things. I can't tell you all the things because they're
Sure, sure.
we save them as we save them as advantages for the clubs that we work with. And I think you mentioned the eight World Series. I think that that comes about not just because I'm helping the team, because there's a lot more to win a World Series than me. Um,
Can
but
you tell us what teams you were part of?
well, the ones that we've won with 4 times with the Red Sox, twice with the Astros, the Cubs, and the Rangers this
Wow,
past year.
incredible.
Um,
Very. You get a
what
World Series ring?
we get rings, yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Very cool.
What it really comes down to is the team's approach to to the whole environment, to the whole subject. Me coming in doing the vision work is one area, but they have other sports scientists, they have dietitians, there's a whole framework. And when a team recognizes that direction is going to be beneficial, they tend to do better, and they tend to ask me to come over to help. And I think that's why it's a whole package, is why people, the teams win. Even the teams that haven't won the World Series that we work with have all been in the postseason repeatedly, and get to division or the league level and so forth. And so there's a lot of new stuff I try to save as advantages for these clubs, so they have the ability to continue to win. Even research, the papers we publish are about 4 or 5 years old. Once we see it, obviously the teams use it, and we're doing things with teams now that one is a quiet eye technique we're doing with some teams that has made a difference for players over the last couple of years. But that won't be published or made available to everybody until about 4 or 5 years, so the team has a competitive advantage. And there are things we did this spring that are new, that are showing very good promise, that might also lead to improved performance. But as I say, we have to go through the vetting of the data, make sure that it really shows that, and then we have to allow the advantage for the clubs that are smart enough to call me to
Sure.
use that.
Yeah, you can't reveal the secret sauce. So tell us about the book that you've written, and as well as I believe you have a YouTube channel where you share insights on sports vision on a weekly basis, I believe. So tell us about the book and the YouTube channel.
No, you're sure, for sure. So the book, I have a copy of it over here. It's called The Eye of the Champion. It's on Amazon. It's 200 pages roughly. Um, it's written not necessarily, well, not for the scientists. It's not a science book for people that are in the field. It's more for athletes or parents of athletes, or people who are interested in how these elite athletes can perform well, and basically puts together much of what I've learned over the last 30 years. Um, and a lot of what we've discussed here, obviously in greater detail in the book, but different ways to assess vision, different ways that we've assessed it, how we publish papers or others have published papers, how we use science to kind of apply this knowledge to help people perform better. So I think on the back it says over here that it's a wake up call, because that's really what it is. People don't really think too much about vision, and those who do will have a competitive advantage over those who don't. And if you read the book, and if you apply some of the things written in the book, and if you now are educated and you go to your eye doctor, you'll know how to talk properly to the eye doctor to say, I need to have this done because I'm serious about my sports. I'm not going to be happy with just 2020, doc. I want you to spend 5 minutes more tweaking those knobs to get me 2015 or 2012, because I need that to perform best, to allow my skills to show and to perform best. But if you don't say that, the doctor doesn't know, and the doctor will usually stop at 2020 because that's fine, and that
Yeah.
will be the end of it.
Just like anything else, you kind of have to advocate for a little extra care.
So the book is really designed to be the vision advocate, to teach people how to be able to understand what I call the power of sports vision for peak performance. So that's the book. The YouTube channel is pretty easy. Sports Vision by Dr. Labby. If you just type in Sports Vision and my last name Labby, I'm pretty sure it will come up on YouTube. And I put every week a video out there, mostly shorts, a minute, so it's not to take a whole lot of time. And this week, for example, is about a player, Xavi Hernandez, a player, a soccer player in Europe. In the past, other ones are about quiet eye, as we spoke about. There's one that's very popular, is how to cheat on your eye exam. And the reason I said that is you have to make titles that people will take. The real thing is how to make sure you have a good eye exam. But there are ways, obviously there are ways to cheat. So the videos, are mostly short. I have many dozens of long form videos, which go into much greater detail as well. But I think if someone's serious about understanding how vision helps them to perform better, that's a good, after the book, the YouTube video is a great place to go. Another thing that I'll tell you about is a video that Red Bull did about 2 years ago, um, called what's it called? Trent's Vision is what it's called. It's a
Okay.
video about the work I do with Trent Alexander-Arnold from Liverpool Football Club, and it really is it's a soccer football video, but it has many of the same approaches that are described in more detail in the book about how we actually trained Trent remotely through the internet for several months, and then went back and retested him and put him through some challenges that were quite amazing. It's a free
Wow.
movie. It's about 47 minutes. It's like a documentary.
Okay.
47-minute movie. It's free on redbull.com. If you just Google Trent's Vision, you'll find it. It's a great 47-minute intro to sports vision.
Yeah, and he's an excellent young player. For those who don't know, he's a Premier League winner, Champions League winner. Plays for the England national team as well. So he's a excellent up and coming. Well, not up and coming. He's
He's,
established.
he's
Just a great
established.
young player. One last question before I let you go. Which sport has the best vision? What athletes?
I guess I get asked that question a lot. And it's important. And I sort of hinted at this throughout our time together. Every sport is different. The vision, when you say what's the best vision, is it the best sharpness of vision? Is the best, peripheral vision? The best awareness of what's happening in the periphery? The best anticipation? The best hand-eye coordination? I'm not sure. We published a paper about our work with the U.S. Olympic team at the Beijing Games, and the paper describes a bunch of different sports and all the different visual abilities. And you find, for example, archery had great sharpness of vision, but
Makes sense.
not very good depth perception because the target is flat.
Mm.
You look at the boxers, their vision wasn't as good as the archers, but their depth perception was much better than the archers, because a boxer better know how far away that right hook is, or he's going
Yeah,
to end up with a swollen jaw.
sure.
Where the archer doesn't need that. And so each sport is different. And so my answer to that question is always, it depends on what sport we're talking about, because every sport has a different package of visual needs. And based on that, to some extent, you might be able to choose who's going to perform well. Maybe I have a kid who plays high school 3 sports, and you check his vision, you find out, your visual profile of what you're good at matches this sport better than that sport. Maybe you should emphasize this over that.
Hmm.
So it can almost be a way to help people understand where they're going to perform their best.
Wow. And I'm sure they probably don't even take that into account when doing that. So that's really interesting.
I told you, secret weapon.
Yeah, there you go. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Labby. This was incredibly fascinating. I'm always curious about the kind of non-traditional aspects of sport, versus, the physical versus the mental versus the vision, and how that's all connected. So thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate you jumping on the show.
My pleasure, Colin. I enjoyed it. Happy to answer. If anyone has any questions, they can get me through the websites and message me, and I'd be happy. Time limiting it, but I'd be happy to help anyone who we can.
Yeah, make sure to check out Dr. Labby's stuff on YouTube and the book and all that stuff. We'll have links in the episode description, so you can go straight to there. All right. Thanks, everybody. Thank you.